Hi everybody, here is my presentation on using experiential learning methods for a communication and team building workshop. This program was developed for entry-level and mid-level supervisors. Most of our supervisors started out in patient care, and most of the training that they've received has been policies, procedures, practices, and they've received very little leadership or management training. And so this workshop was intended to get that started. And it started by actually helping them to create self-awareness of how they interact with other people and how they could be affecting their relationships with their supervisors, with their peers, with their teammates, with their subordinates. And so it's a method to help them improve their communication and their interpersonal skills. Because communication is the basis for a lot of different soft skills, leadership, development, management, those kinds of things. Communication is the basis for all of that. This also created we're working to create a support network of peers between the supervisors. They don't see each other very often, and so bringing them all together for training is a good start. And then also we wanted to continue that after this workshop with additional training, and then also with a professional learning community online. This workshop was based on DISC profiles, D-I-S-C, as a common language to recognize people's differences in their adaptive behavior, their natural behavior, behavioral styles. And it's not rocket science. There are many different profiles. Myers-Briggs is one. But what I like about the DISC program is that it's a little bit simpler for a business context, and it's very actionable. Not only do we learn how we prefer to behave in different ways, we learn how to recognize that in other people, and then what do you do with that information? How can you approach that a person who may be a different style from you to have a more effective interaction? Part of this workshop was teaching the supervisors the DISC language. So there are 4 different DISC profiles, D-I-S-C. D is decisive, I is interactive, S is stabilizing, and C is cautious. And in the workshop, we spend time learning about each different style, and then we have some different interactions that we'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes, using some experiential learning to actually practice having interactions, focusing on these different styles. This workshop was based on experiential learning practices, primarily reflective practice and communities of practice. And those activities were woven throughout, and they started with pre-class activities. So before the class, each supervisor completed an online profile where and then they got a report. They got a 25-page report where they learned what their own style was, whether they were D, I, S, or C, and actually everybody's a combination of all 3 of those. And then I did an individual debriefing with each one of them, a coaching session one-on-one, to talk with them about their style, make sure they understood it, and then also talk about the differences between their natural style, which is how you are naturally, and that's probably not going to change too much over your whole life. Your adaptive style is where sometimes you're adaptive and behavioral the same, sometimes it's different, and usually when it's different, we talk about what's going on in your home life, what's going on in your work life, where maybe your behavior, you are adapting to act differently than your natural style and what that means. So we start that reflective process one-on-one before the workshop. And then the workshop had several activities that were reflective in nature throughout the one-day workshop. And then we tried to continue this learning post-class with an online forum, an online discussion forum, kind of like we do with Canvas. And that's been we've got mixed reviews on that. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. Just real quickly, this is one of the handouts that we use in the class. for people to help learn how to identify the four behavioral styles. And we look at things like tone of voice, body language, gestures, their pace, in how to recognize the differences in people's behavioral styles. And we do different reflective activities in when we're talking about each of these. We focus on each of the D, I, S, and C behaviors, and then we do different role plays where people can learn about the different behaviors. Reflective practice was an experiential learning method that was woven throughout this program. It started with the individual coaching sessions, and it continued during the workshop through the role plays. After each role play, we had small group discussions and whole group discussions about their reflections on how that worked, what the challenges were. Throughout the day, the supervisors reflected on people in their own lives, either their work teams or their spouse or somebody where they realized they finally understood this person a little bit more, knowing more about how they interact and their behavioral styles. We also talked about who do you know? Who do you know who's a D personality or an I personality? And we did that throughout the day. And then the other part of experiential learning that we used in this was the communities of practice. And we really wanted to develop a support network among the supervisors for learning, that we're going to continue with other types of training. And then also, I really wanted that online discussion to continue to be ongoing after the workshop, because the workshop really is just an introduction to this behavioral analysis. And so that was why I created the online discussion forum, to keep that learning going after the workshop. My observations from doing this workshop was that experiential learning is an effective learning method for teaching communication skills and team building skills. There were some challenges, however. The supervisors were initially uncomfortable with this level of an interactive class. They just weren't expecting to be interactive all day long with very short lecture segments. They came in with their coffee and their notepad, and they expected to kind of settle in and take notes. And so I think I would do a little bit more to set expectations around that. It was difficult to create role play situations that were realistic and simple. That took quite a bit of prep time on my part. So that was a challenge. And then also, this workshop is only an introduction. It's kind of one of those, use it or lose it things. If the supervisors don't go out and actually practice this, practice the DISC behavior recognition and action items, they'll lose it. And so that was one of the reasons why I created the online professional learning community. But that in itself had challenges. We found that it was not really a high priority once people were done with the class. And it became very time consuming also for me as a moderator. Part of my job is training, but I have other parts of my job. And so I had to kind of keep coming back to this and make sure I was keeping the online discussion going. And I found that if I didn't work at that quite a bit, the content was mostly social, which was okay. That still creates a positive learning environment, but I was really hoping that it would be more content driven as people experience different profiles and would share their interactions based on the DISC content. So in conclusion, here are my tips, my recommendations. I would allow prep time for the role play design. That was time consuming on my part. I would set expectations for the interaction. I would do that in the beginning of the workshop. I would do that ahead of time in how I communicate with the supervisors, so they kind of know what to expect. And then I would also recommend doing a gradual warm up, do some icebreaker activities, do some low involvement, low difficulty activities to kind of let people warm up to that engagement during the class. I would also introduce the professional learning community in the workshop and have teams of people create protocols for how that was going to work and kind of what the purpose of the PLC would be. And then I would plan more time for the moderator, for me, to moderate that online discussion and kind of keep it going and keep it focused on the content. So that's all I have. My next page is references. Thank you for listening.